Hey guys, tonight we walk into the boots of a man whose socks haven't been dry since October. Now, we wake up half buried in the Western Front trenches somewhere in Belgium or France, where dreams end in explosions and breakfast involves rats stealing from your coat pocket. You would never think that waking up could feel like both survival and surrender at once. And yet, here you are, surrounded by mud, mold, and misery, trying to remember if you're still alive or just haven't noticed yet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments, because I promise, wherever you are, it's better than here. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the sound of boots sloshing through water and a tin cup clanging against someone's belt. It's dark, but not in a comforting way. This is trench dark, where the sky is technically above you. But the cloud cover is thick enough to make you forget the sun exists. You're wrapped in a wool blanket that smells like mildew, smoke, and desperation. And it's unclear whether the wetness on your face is rain, condensation, or a fellow soldier's breath. Your pillow is a sandbag. You'd thank it for its service if you weren't sure it was infested with lice. Your neck crackles when you sit up. Your knees ache. And there's a dull buzz in your ears, not from shellfire, but from the chorus of trench flies harmonizing around your head like a barbershop quartet of disease. And then comes the rat. Not a cute Pixar sidekick, but a trench rat the size of a Subway sandwich, sniffing around for biscuit crumbs or something that used to be your foot. It scurries away when you move. You blink blearily. Morning roll call in 10 minutes. That is, if anyone remembered what day it is. The trench itself is a masterpiece of organized, wrought wooden planks for flooring, but most of them warped and sunken. Walls made of sandbags and mud, reinforced with whatever garbage could be hammered into place. Water is ankle deep. On a good day, you call that a shallow puddle. On a bad day, someone drowns. A sergeant passes, grunting up. Lads, as if this were a Boy Scout camping trip. You put on your helmet, not because you're going anywhere, but because there's always a non-zero chance a German mortar decides to make you its 7 a.m. appointment. Your fingers are numb as you strap it on cold weather, mixed with the kind of fatigue that makes even basic motion feel like an act of civil disobedience. You cough into your sleeve. Everyone's coughing. It's part of the ambient soundtrack. Muffled boots, distant shouting, a guy named Arthur hacking like a chimney. Somewhere nearby, a man is weeping but softly, as though not to disturb the rats. Historians still argue whether trench rot or trench dread was worse. The truth is, the body and the mind compete to collapse first. You look at the guy beside you. He hasn't moved in 2 hours. You nudge him. He groans. Barely. Okay. Alive. You log that away. Someone asks if it's Monday. No one knows. You haven't seen a calendar since you enlisted. All you know is that it's not payday and definitely not leave day. Maybe next week. Maybe never. You stretch, stand up, immediately regret it. The small of your back has molded itself to the curve of the trench wall. And let's not even talk about your left foot currently auditioning for the role of a damp loaf of bread. But still, you get up, because that's the deal. You get up. Every day in the mud, in the cold, in the middle of the most boring apocalypse ever televised by your subconscious. And you live to not die another hour. You mutter something about coffee. It's a joke. There is no coffee. There's only recycled tea in a tin cup that hasn't been washed since it fell in the latrine. But you drink it anyway, because it's warm, and warm is rare. Rats, mold, and trench rot may haunt your dreams. But this is your morning routine now. Welcome to the war that eats time, sanity, and socks equally. Your boots squelch with each step, each one a gentle reminder that your socks are now less clothing and more marinated regret. You trudge along the duckboard path, not because you have somewhere to go, but because standing still feels like surrender. Morning in the trenches doesn't smell like coffee. It smells like old mud, gun oil, spoiled rations, and at least one dead thing that no one has found yet, probably under the corner near Corporal Finch's hole. He stopped asking people to help him dig it out. What's the point? Breakfast arrives in a bucket, literally. A dented pail with something that was once meat, floating in grease the consistency of wartime despair. You use your trench knife to spread it on a hard biscuit, which cracks like chalk and tastes slightly worse than it looks. You chew slowly, like you're trying to trick your jaw into forgetting that this is bully beef, a phrase that makes it sound like a school lunch, but tastes more like betrayal in a tin. Historians still argue whether the beef was ever actually beef, or just aggressive optimism packed into rectangles to wash it down. Tea. Sort of. It's hot water that once waved at a tea leaf in passing. You cradle the tin mug like it's holy. Steam curls upward into your nose, carrying with it the faint hope of warmth. Someone drops a sugar cube in theirs. He's instantly the most envied man in the unit. You don't even like sugar, but suddenly you would mortgage your soul for a secondhand granule. And just as you think it might be a tolerable morning, the artillery starts. Boom, boom, boom. It's not close enough to panic yet, just distant enough to make your bones hum. You flinch reflexively. Everyone does. It's a nervous tick at this point, like blinking or sighing. One of the new guys asks if it's incoming or outgoing. Nobody answers. The joke is, we all pretend we can tell. Truth is, if you can hear it, it's not yours. If you can't hear it, start digging your grave. You find a place to perch more sandbags, stacked in a lazy zigzag to absorb shrapnel. You lean your back and try not to think. But thinking is the only thing that's still free, and you've got plenty of time to do it. You think about home, not in the sweet, nostalgic way, but in the aching, surreal way, like maybe you invented it. Was there really a woman a house, a pub down the road? Did you ever complain about taxes? You'd give anything for a boring tax complaint now. Death and mud don't collect viat. Private Wilkins starts muttering about his mother's garden. He does this every morning. Today, it's the roses, apparently. They bloomed redder than blood. You nod. Though you've never met his mother or her roses, it doesn't matter. Everyone here needs one harmless hallucination to stay sane. His is a garden. Yours is socks that stay dry by mid-morning. The smell gets worse, not because of anything new, but because the sun, yes, it occasionally shows up, starts to warm the trench stew of human scent, decaying food, and general despair. You breathe through your mouth. Doesn't help. Someone lights a cigarette, more out of ritual than addiction. The smoke masks the worst of it. A little. You don't smoke, but you loiter near him like you're stealing warmth and nostalgia all at once. A rat scurries past, dragging a scrap of uniform. Someone jokes that it's starting its own regiment. You laugh. Sort of. Gallows humor is the only comedy left. The line between hysterical laughter and full breakdown is thinner than barbed wire. Suddenly, a whistle. Not a nice kind. This isn't a referee calling halftime. It's the universal sound of hurry up and suffer. You snap to attention. Orders come down. Patrol duty. Great. Time to leave the relative safety of the trench and go explore the great outdoors of craters, corpses, and barbed wire. that wants to hug you forever. You gear up, rifle, helmet, bayonet, a pouch of bullets that always feels either too heavy or not enough. The mud tries to keep your boots as a hostage. You yank them free. Every step is a negotiation with gravity and dread. The sergeant yells something about glory. No one believes him. Glory left the trenches months ago. Now, we're just hoping to avoid an obituary. You crouch low and climb out of the trench like a ghost who still owes rent. Your boots sink immediately into no man's land mud. That's not just mud, but a historical document of every unfortunate soul who came before you. It smells metallic, earthy, and faintly of fear. The ground sucks at your legs like it wants a conversation. You do your best to keep moving. This is not the time to become sentimental swamp art. Patrolling sounds like a noble task, but in practice, it's less strategy and more roulette with bullets. You move slowly, not because you're careful, but because your brain is stuck somewhere between animal instinct and existential resignation. You duck beneath rusted barbed wire, which is essentially nature's way of saying, don't go here, and the Army's way of saying, go here. But slowly and painfully, a dead tree leans sideways, stripped bare by shell fire. It looks like it gave up months ago. You use it for cover anyway, because even defeat is useful in war. Just ahead, you spot a half-buried gas mask, no owner in sight. Either he made it back, or he didn't need it anymore. Probably the latter. Every step is uncertain. The landscape shifts like a trap. One wrong move and you're ankle deep in a crater that wasn't on the map this morning. You don't scream when it happens, though. Screaming is for people with energy. You just hiss and wince, like a man losing at chess to a cat. Your squad fans out. Quiet, says the corporal, as if whispering will stop shrapnel. He points toward a collapsed bunker ahead. It might be an enemy nest. Or it might just be a very unlucky molehill. You're sent to check. Of course you are. You draw your bayonet. Not because you think you'll use it, but because it makes your hands feel less stupid. Inside the hole, nothing. Dirt. Worms. A boot with no foot in it. Congratulations. You're now an archaeologist of tragedy. Back on the line. The sun pretends to care for 10 minutes, casting just enough light to make everything look worse. You squint toward the enemy trench. It's eerily still. Too still. You hear the metallic skitter of something shifting and freeze. Maybe it's a rat. Maybe it's death on vacation. Either way, you don't blink. Then a shout. One of your men spotted movement. Gunfire follows loud, chaotic, and so random it could have been composed by a toddler with cymbals. You hit the dirt, which, conveniently, is also your friend, your blanket, and your primary source of skin diseases. Bullets slap the mud near your ears, making your eardrums vibrate like a wasp in a tin can. You don't fire back. You're not sure where the shots are even coming from. Besides, your rifle jammed earlier. You were going to fix it. You forgot. Now your greatest weapon is awkward body positioning. After 10 minutes, which your nerves count as 53, the gunfire stops. No one says anything. You check yourself for holes. Still intact. Which is frankly rude, considering how tired you are. You want an injury that's just bad enough to get you sent home, but not bad enough to be tragic. Like a heroic sprained ankle. Eventually, the corporal calls you back. The patrol is over. No intel gained. No enemies killed. But you're alive. Which is the kind of success they don't write poems about. You re-enter the trench. Familiar smells. Familiar mud. Familiar stares from other men who were also out there once, and also came back wondering why. You sit, slowly, like your joints were cast in rust. Your fingers shake. You tell yourself it's just the cold. It's always just the cold. Corporal Finch says it was a good patrol. Nobody died. He means it. But his voice says otherwise. He lights a match with trembling fingers. The flame flickers, a tiny rebellion against everything else. You stare at it longer than you should. Historians still argue whether these trench patrols served any real strategic value, or if they were just a way to remind men they were alive by putting them close to death. But at least now you have something new to dream about, specifically, never doing that again. And as you close your eyes for a moment, just one, because even panic needs a nap, you hear a distant thud. The shelling is resumed. You jolt awake, not from dreams, but from earth-pounding, sky-shaking percussion. Welcome to breakfast in the trenches. Spoiler, there's no breakfast. Just the reassuring rattle of distant artillery saying, "Good morning, we still hate you." You fumble with your mess tin, which is cold, dented, and only slightly cleaner than the latrine. Breakfast today is bully beef. Again, basically canned despair with a dash of industrial sadness. It has the texture of cat food, the smell of a wet dog in a tin barn, and the nutritional appeal of wallpaper paste. But hey, it has calories. And in this game, calories mean not fainting mid-crawl. You chew slowly, partly because it's hard, partly because chewing gives you something to do, besides remembering where you are. A rat scuttles past your boots, bold, well-fed, and absolutely not paying rent. He looks at your bully beef and politely declines. That's where you're at now, outranked by a rat. Next to you, Private Ellis pokes at a piece of hardtack with his bayonet. He's trying to decide if it's food or building material. Hardtack is like bread's mean cousin stone-like, dry, and able to chip teeth faster than bad luck. The joke is, it's called hardtack because Mouth Shiv didn't make it through Army approval. You sip from your canteen. Water tastes like rusted pennies and regret. Historians still argue whether trench water was ever potable or if everyone just collectively decided to pretend. Either way, boiling it isn't an option. Fire attracts enemy shells. And there's a strict no cooking while dying policy out here. Lunchtime comes without fanfare. Surprise, it's also bully beef. You poke it with your spoon to see if it's sentient yet. It isn't. But you're not convinced it won't be by tomorrow. Someone nearby opens a tin and yells triumphantly, "It's jam." Jam is like winning the lottery. If the lottery prize was strawberry-flavored glue, he offers a dab on your hardtack, and for a fleeting second, you feel human again. In the evening, there's a thin soup served in an old ammo tin. It smells faintly of onion, but mostly just like warmth, which makes it a rare delight. You cradle it like a lost puppy. One of the older soldiers calls it trench tea. It's mostly water with secrets. Food here isn't just about hunger, it's about the fragile illusion of normalcy. Eating is a ritual, a moment where hands are busy and minds can drift. Even if you're chewing on something that once resembled meat during the Roman Empire. You pretend. You imagine your mother's cooking. You imagine a real plate. You imagine taste. There's always the rumor about chocolate. Somewhere. Someone heard a shipment of chocolate was coming to the front. It becomes legend overnight. Chocolate, the mythical food of memory, childhood, peacetime. But the truth is, even if it arrives, it will be old, chalky, and melted into a tragic slab by the time it reaches your trench. Sometimes you trade. One man has a half stick of gum. It's already been chewed once, but he swears it's minty. Another has dried beans, but no way to cook them. So technically, they're just pocket rocks. It's capitalism. Trench style, inflated hopes, deflated bellies. Meals are unpredictable. Supplies come late or not at all. Some days, you eat twice. Other days, you lick the inside of a tin and call it scraping the flavor memory. Food packages from home are rare and revered. A single biscuit from England is handled like a family heirloom. One guy cried when his arrived moldy. Another cried harder when his didn't arrive at all. There's always that one guy who eats everything with a smile. Says it's better than what he had back on the farm. You both admire and distrust him. Anyone who enjoys bully beef without flinching might be part machine. Food fatigue is real. You dream of butter, of eggs, of anything that didn't come from a rusty can or require dental insurance to chew. And still, somehow, you eat. You must. Hunger doesn't wait for peace. Later that night, as you scrape the last bit of jam off a tin lid with your pinky, you wonder how your body keeps going, how you haven't just disintegrated into the trench floor like all the other forgotten pieces of war, but your stomach gurgles, which is basically applause in this environment. So you finish your meal, lean back, and prepare for the next big surprise. You hear a whistle, not a bird, another shell incoming. Your uniform clings to you like a curse stitched in wool. It's heavy, damp, and somehow manages to be both too tight and saggy in all the wrong places. And the color, a charming shade of muddy despair, courtesy of the Western Front's unofficial dye trench filth. You shift in your stiff coat, a stiff and scratchy blend of serge wool and antique suffering. Designed for style over sanity, it absorbs moisture like a sponge and dries approximately never. The collar chafes, the cuffs scratch, and no matter how you move, something itches. Possibly because everything itches. Lice have declared this fabric a theme park, and you're the ride. Yes, lice, your closest trench companions. Tiny, persistent, and seemingly more loyal than your rations. They nest in seams, party on your scalp, and treat your underclothes like a dance floor. Every soldier carries a comb, not for vanity, but for warfare. Lice warfare. You sit for hours, picking them off, one by one, crushing them between fingernails with the precision of a deranged jeweler. Still, the lice are better than the fleas, or the trench mites, or whatever mysterious six-legged cryptids have found a home in your undergarments. Historians still argue whether some infestations were native to Europe or brought in with the soldiers. Either way, you're hosting a full ecosystem now. No need to thank you, nature. As for socks, well, you technically own a pair. They began their lives soft and woolly, but now resemble wilted lasagna. Every morning you pray for a dry pair, and every morning the socks laugh. Some men get trench foot, which is basically your foot becoming a raisin soaked in vinegar. The smell is legendary, the pain worse, and the treatment. Airing your feet in a trench during shell fire. Good luck with that. Changing clothes is a luxury nobody can afford. You've worn the same underclothes for weeks, maybe months. They've fused with your soul. Your shirt has a hole in the armpit, but it's functional. Your trousers sag in the back, but still hold up your dignity, barely. You dream of clean linen the way poets dream of freedom. Boots, though, are sacred. They're your lifeline. Thick, stiff leather boots, built to stomp through mud, but also built to betray you. They rub your heels raw, collect water like buckets, and grow mold if ignored. And they're always ignored. When your boot finally rips open at the toe, your big toe peeks out like a tiny white flag. Surrender to the elements. Even your greatcoat, a supposedly warm, protective garment, becomes a burden. It weighs about as much as your regrets. And when it's wet, which is always, it doubles as a personal anchor. It's designed to keep you warm during night watch. But mostly, it just traps body heat and all the wonderful aromas you've cultivated over weeks of zero hygiene. There's also your helmet, technically not clothing, but let's include it, because you wear it every second. It's metal, concussive, and filled with the echo of your own thoughts. Also rainwater, also occasionally soup. If you run out of mess tins, it's your hat, your bowl, your friend. You tie your scarf tighter, it's coarse, itchy wool, possibly knitted by someone back home with love and absolutely zero regard for skin sensitivity. But it does help muffle the sound of nearby coughing, moaning, or the occasional distant scream. You'd knit one yourself if your hands weren't frozen, blistered, or too busy swatting flies. There's no laundry, just mud. The unofficial cleaning method is scraping. Some men try to rinse their clothes in rainwater, then realize they've just invented wet lice. Others attempt fire drying, which often results in crispy sleeves or accidental combustion. Most give up. You too. Eventually. The smell? Ah, yes. The aroma. A rich blend of human sweat, unwashed wool, decay, old meat, and regret. You carry your scent like a badge of survival. No cologne required. If anything, your uniform doubles as a repellent to wild animals, romantic prospects, and, ideally, enemy scouts. And still, this is better than being naked, because being naked means being vulnerable. And out here, every inch of your body needs armor, no matter how threadbare, filthy, or parasite infested. Your clothes don't protect you from bullets, but they protect you from feeling utterly exposed to the absurdity of this war. So, you wrap yourself tighter, scratch your neck again, and shiver under layers of damp wool. You tell yourself this is temporary, that someday, somewhere, you'll wear cotton again, or silk, or even pajamas. But for now, you'll settle for not being eaten alive by your own sleeves. Your mouth is a battlefield of its own, and every bite you take feels like chewing glass through a swamp. Dental hygiene. That's a fairy tale from the faraway land of civilian life. Out here, your toothbrush is your fingernail, and your toothpaste is the faint hope that you won't bite into something hard enough to send shooting pain through your jaw. Each morning, if you can call it that, you smack your lips and taste the delightful bouquet of stale biscuit crumbs, trenched tea, and something unidentifiable that might be rotten meat or a dying molar. Your breath could knock out a canary, and yet no one notices because everyone smells equally apocalyptic. Historians still argue whether oral hygiene was even discussed in military briefings, or simply written off as low priority next to the more pressing matter of staying alive. Let's talk toothaches. That tiny throb in your back molar. It starts as an annoyance, then becomes your whole personality. You try ignoring it, but soon even chewing on the softest army biscuit feels like being punched by a blacksmith. You might beg a medic to look at it, but he's busy holding someone's femur together with shoelaces. And even if he could help, all he can offer is a shot of rum and a pair of pliers that haven't been sterilized since the Crimean War. Yes, extractions happen. Field dentistry is basically medieval torture with modern uniforms. There's no Novocaine, no numbing, no comforting background music unless you count the sound of distant shellfire. You sit, you scream, and someone yanks until the tooth. Your dignity, and probably a bit of your soul come loose. If you're lucky, infection doesn't set in. If you're not, well, it was nice knowing you. Jaw. Cavities thrive in your mouth, like trench rats in a bunker. You consume high-carb, low-nutrient rations jam, stale bread, more jam, sugar is everywhere, except in the form of anything enjoyable. Combine that with zero brushing, and your teeth become tiny sculptures of decay. Soldiers write home about missing home-cooked meals. You write home about missing molars. Gums are a soft, swollen battlefield. They bleed when you breathe wrong. They pulse when you're lying still. Gingivitis isn't just a word anymore, it's a roommate. Some guys develop trench mouth, a lovely condition involving ulcers, necrotic tissue, and breath so bad it could be used as chemical warfare. There's no cure, really, just resignation. And let's not forget the fringe theories. Some swear by chewing tobacco to clean their mouths because coating your inflamed gums in tar seems like a good time. Others rub salt on their gums, or suck on charcoal, or pray to saints whose names they've forgotten. There are even rumors of soldiers boiling their own socks to gargle the water. Historians still debate whether these were desperate attempts at hygiene or early signs of war-induced madness. You miss mint. You miss toothpaste with its artificial promises. You miss toothbrushes that weren't made from twigs or scavenged matchsticks. And you especially miss not flinching every time your tongue accidentally brushes that one rotting tooth. The one that throbs with every heartbeat. The one that mocks you in your dreams. Sleep doesn't help. You grind your teeth during nightmares and wake up with a jaw that feels like it fought a trench shovel. Some guys tie cloths around their heads, cartoon style, to hold their mouths shut while they sleep. Others simply lie there, clenching, muttering, groaning, because pain is the trench's favorite lullaby. And no, you can't just wait it out. Teeth don't heal themselves. They crack, crumble, rot, and then infect your bloodstream. Some soldiers die of abscesses, literally. Their last words weren't cries for glory, but desperate whispers about jaw pain. It's not noble. It's not dramatic. It's just horrifyingly mundane. But this is the glamour of war. No one writes ballads about toothaches. No one paints murals of swollen gums. But you carry this suffering in silence, because complaining about dental agony feels petty next to missing limbs and collapsing trenches. Still, you dream of biting into an apple, a real one, not a dehydrated army ration. You imagine the crisp snap, the sweet juice, the miracle of chewing without pain. And then you wake up, grimace, and sip lukewarm trench tea that tastes faintly of metal and hopelessness. You spit out a blood-flecked thread of gum tissue and keep moving, because in the trenches, even your mouth is a casualty. By now, your mouth is a battlefield, but your body, that's a full-blown front line. Every muscle enlisted against your will. You don't wake up in the trenches so much as you peel yourself off a damp, half-frozen burlap sack and try to remember how knees are supposed to work. The good news? You have a job. The bad news? It's hard labor that doesn't care about your opinion, your previous injuries, or the fact that it's been raining for 14 days straight. Every day starts the same. The whistle blows, and you're up, if not awake. Trench warfare doesn't really involve charging heroically across fields. No, most of your time is spent shoveling. You dig ditches. Then you reinforce the ones you dug yesterday, which collapsed because of the rain, or shell fire, or rats deciding to renovate. You're essentially a human earthworm with a helmet. The mud is its own species alive, aggressive, and emotionally abusive. It clings to your boots like a jealous ex and makes every step feel like dragging cement blocks. Shovels bend, hands blister, and you can't stop. Because a trench that floods is a trench that buries you alive. Historians still argue whether the mud of the Western Front caused more psychological damage than the constant shelling. There's a reason they called it the War of Attrition. It's not just about losing lives. It's about losing stamina, sanity, and shoulder joints. You carry ammo crates that feel like lead coffins. You haul sandbags until your spine starts developing opinions. And when you're not lugging gear, you're on patrol, slowly crawling over no man's land like an overcautious snail with anxiety issues. And rest a myth. You take turns resting, which means you lie in the trench, fully clothed, half soaked, trying to nap between artillery rounds and lice bites. Your pillow is a gas mask bag. Your blanket is guilt, even when you're off duty. You're not free. You're just less actively miserable. Even more charming, there's always something to repair. Dugouts collapse. Fire steps erode. Barbed wire rusts and falls over in the wind. Congratulations, you're now a full-time carpenter, roofer, and plumber. But without the tools or the training. Also, rats eat everything you build, so that's nice. Let's not forget about carrying the wounded. When shell fire hits, you sprint well, hobble across shattered duckboards, dragging your bleeding friend back to safety. It's a workout routine with very low motivation and extremely high stakes. Sometimes, the guy you're carrying doesn't make it, and sometimes you have to pretend you didn't notice. And then there's latrine duty. If you've ever thought digging a toilet hole in a collapsing trench filled with rainwater and regret sounded fun, well, surprise. That's your job now. Soldiers rotate this delightful task, which combines manual labor with a scent so haunting it deserves its own war memorial. The latrines overflow. The shovels snap. The smell clings to your soul. Women, children, civilians, they're somewhere far away. But even there, labor is relentless. Women knit socks in factories, scrub hospital floors, or tend to injured men while battling their own exhaustion. Children collect scrap metal, run errands, and in some cases, lie about their age and join the fight. War doesn't leave anyone off the chore chart. Quirky fact, soldiers sometimes wore their uniforms backward to keep the front clean for inspection. Yes, even trench soldiers need to look presentable, at least from the waist up. Image is everything, even if your boots are rotten off your feet. And here's the kicker, there is no upward mobility. You're not going to dig your way to a promotion. You're not working toward retirement or a bonus check. You're just trying not to die before someone decides your war is over. At night, your muscles throb like church bells. Your back feels like it's been used to test landmines. And yet, you still dream of rest days, as mythical as unicorns or dry socks. This isn't noble suffering. This is just endless, soul-numbing, mud-caked work, a kind of labor that chews you up slowly, over months and years, without a single rousing speech or dramatic music cue. And yet, you keep going because everyone else does. You'd think war itself would be your biggest enemy, but the weather, the weather has its own sadistic personality. It's not trying to kill you out of strategy. It's just trying to kill you for fun. In the trenches of World War I, you don't just fight soldiers, you fight the sky, the wind, and a climate with zero empathy. Let's start with winter. The cold doesn't arrive, it infiltrates. It slips through your threadbare uniform, wriggles into your boots, and settles into your bones like it's paying rent. You try to sleep, but your feet feel like bricks dipped in ice water. Your fingers go numb. Then stop listening altogether. There's no fire, no heater, and certainly no blanket service. You huddle with your fellow soldiers like awkward penguins in a trench-shaped meat freezer, whispering promises of summer that sound increasingly like fairy tales. Frostbite is a rite of passage. The tips of your ears, your toes, maybe your nose start to blacken. You know it's bad when losing feeling becomes a relief. Some men lose entire limbs, not to bullets, but to temperatures that could freeze a decent-sized lake. Historians still argue whether more soldiers suffered long-term health effects from the cold than from chemical weapons, and honestly, it's a close race. Now, switch the season, it's summer, and instead of freezing, you're roasting alive in a trench that smells like expired soup. The mud dries into a crusty film. Flies gather like groupies. Your body feels like it's been basted in sweat and hopelessness. There's no fan, no breeze, no shade, just a helmet and a sun that seems personally offended by your existence. And the smell? Oh, the smell. In heat, decay accelerates, Corpses of rats, sometimes men, begin to bloat and burst. The latrines ferment. The very air is seasoned with a funk that defies science. You breathe through your mouth, but now your tongue is involved in the suffering. Even sarcasm wilts in this humidity. Rain, that's not relief. That's betrayal. Trench walls collapse, turning into vertical sludge, slides. Flooding is so frequent that some trenches come with built-in water levels, like poorly managed swimming pools. Boots vanish in muck. Rifles jam. You sleep standing, because lying down means sinking. And yet, your commanding officer still yells about posture. Every season brings its own brand of discomfort, and your uniform is deeply uninterested in helping. In winter, it's too thin. In summer, it's too thick. In rain, it's absorbent, and it never dries. Imagine wearing a damp wool suit 24/7 while being yelled at and occasionally shot at. That's the vibe. There's also trench foot, a condition that sounds quaint until your foot starts turning gray and your skin peels like soggy wallpaper. Soldiers were told to rub whale oil on their feet to keep them dry. Yes, whale oil, because apparently, when your foot is rotting off, what you need is aquatic grease. Then there's lightning. You think you're safe in a ditch, but that metal helmet, it turns you into a tiny human lightning rod. Several soldiers were reportedly struck during storms, which, frankly, feels like the weather just showing off at that point. Snowstorms, heat waves, hail, freezing rain, you're exposed to all of it, with no control, no roof, and no mercy. You build makeshift covers out of tarps, sandbags, even old biscuit tins. None of them work. The rain finds you. It always finds you. One fringe account describes soldiers stuffing their shirts with hay to stay warm. Yes, hay. Because nothing says modern warfare like turning yourself into a scarecrow just to survive the night. You start to dream of climate control. Not fancy just a ceiling. Maybe 4 walls. Maybe not feeling your eyelashes freeze shut when you blink. But those dreams are luxury. Weather doesn't pick sides. It's not patriotic. It just tears everyone apart equally. And unlike bullets, you can't dodge it. So you just keep marching, keep standing, keep hoping that maybe tomorrow the clouds will take pity. Spoiler, they won't. And now, the final insult water. The one thing your body absolutely cannot live without. But here, in the trenches, it's either missing entirely or way too enthusiastic. Either you're desperate for a sip or you're drowning in it. Let's begin with thirst. The Army says it provides water. Technically, that's true. What they don't say is that it's transported in old petrol cans, leaving your canteen tasting like someone blended mud, metal, and motor oil, clean, refreshing, and definitely flammable. Some soldiers joke that it keeps the lice away. Others suspect it just fuels hallucinations. You boil what you can, assuming you can find firewood, or anything remotely dry to burn. That means tearing up rations, letters from home, even socks. Historians still argue whether more men lost their minds from trench stress or from simply sipping unboiled. Bacteria-rich puddles. Dysentery waits behind every careless gulp, ready to turn your insides into a war zone of their own. But bathing, that's a rare luxury, a whispered rumor, like warm socks or edible meat. Bathing here isn't about hygiene. It's about survival rituals involving tin buckets, muddy runoff, and intense regret. And you don't bathe in the trench unless you want to become one with it. Even worse, bathing is dangerous. Yes, dangerous. Some medical officers of the time believed that bathing opened up your skin's pores, welcoming disease like an overly polite doorman. Others thought water weakened the Constitution. So, just to be safe, most soldiers skipped the bath altogether and leaned into the natural perfume of mildew, sweat, and something that might be mustard. You'd think rain would offer a chance to rinse off. But no, rain means floods. The trenches fill like bathtubs with you inside. Water seeps into boots, bags, letters, and bones. You get wet and stay wet for days, sometimes weeks. Your socks squelch. Your soul wrinkles. Trench foot thrives. Water is the enemy now. It's the silent one. It sneaks up in the form of mist, sweat, rain, soup, and everything in between. You ration it, you fear it, you beg for it to leave, then cry when it's gone. Then there's the latrine situation, which, again, involves water or a lack thereof. Imagine a row of pits dug into the mud, barely shielded by a few flaps of fabric. The stench becomes a landmark. These toilets often overflow, especially after rain. Runoff trickles ominously into places it absolutely should not go. Soldiers invent songs about it, not cheerful ones. Some desperate units build urinals from empty artillery shells. Others simply accept that the trench is both bedroom and bathroom, and pray that the guy next to them has decent aim. One quirky detail, some soldiers were issued tiny water purifiers, glass beads, or strange powders to clean whatever they managed to scoop up. Whether these worked is debatable. Let's just say, if the water didn't kill you immediately, it probably made you stronger, or deeply, deeply confused. At this point, your relationship with water is complicated. You dream of baths, but also fear the puddle next to your bedroll. You drink cautiously, knowing your next sip might come with a side of intestinal rebellion. You wash your hands, if at all, with mud and prayer. And you absolutely never trust anything that drips, leaks, or trickles. It's hard to imagine that a liquid so essential could be so horrifying. But this is war, and in the trenches, water has no interest in keeping you alive. Now, close your eyes, breathe in gently. You're no longer in a flooded ditch, no longer soaked to the bone, or scraping ice from the edge of your helmet. The air is dry, warm, calm. There's a soft breeze, no gas, no gunfire, just the gentle hum of silence. Let that stillness wrap around you like a clean blanket, freshly laundered and blissfully lice-free. Your boots are dry, your socks are soft. Your next drink will be clean, cold, and taste like absolutely nothing. And that's exactly how it should be. Sleep easy now. You've survived worse. As you shuffle across the temple floor, careful not to trip over the ceremonial rug, which is absolutely crawling with old rose petals and possibly some beetles. You begin to understand the gravity of it all. Fertility rituals weren't just superstitious pageantry. They were social glue, agricultural insurance policies, and at times national propaganda. If the harvest failed, fingers pointed at the priest, the ritual, or the unworthy participant. Spoiler, that's you. Oh, and did I mention the music? It's more like the rhythmic clash of bronze bowls, accompanied by long, drawn-out humming. You try to join in. You fail spectacularly. Someone nods approvingly anyway. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Mesopotamian fertility rituals included symbolic planting of seed into the earth while singing to the goddess. Except, the seed wasn't always metaphorical. Let's just say, ancient euphemisms were not social math. The fire pops. The priestess raises a carved idol, and everyone bows. You do too, mostly to hide the fact you're laughing nervously. Someone offers you a drink thick, bitter beer, possibly fermented in a goat's stomach. You sip it politely. It tastes like regret and barley. You're not sure which part is supposed to bless the soil, the dance, the sacrifice, or your gastrointestinal suffering. By the end of the ceremony, you're dizzy, sweating, and probably spiritually married to a deity. The villagers nod with hope in their eyes. You're wondering how to politely decline the next ritual. You wake the next morning, still reeking of incense, goat milk, and divine responsibility. If you thought fertility rituals ended with a single night of symbolic marriage and awkward chanting, think again. The festivities stretch over days, sometimes weeks, depending on how many deities your village hopes to impress before planting season. You stretch your sore limbs and realize that sleep happened not on a mattress, but on a mat woven from reeds, currently stuck to your back like Velcro. Breakfast, a celebratory bowl of lukewarm grain mush, garnished with a fig if you're lucky, or if the priestess is still feeling spiritual. And yes, you're still in the same garlic-scented robe, because changing clothes before the land is spiritually ready is apparently bad luck. The joke's on you. You have exactly one robe anyway. As the sun rises, the procession begins. You're paraded down a dusty road lined with villagers clapping in rhythm. There's a drumbeat, pulsing like a collective heartbeat, and someone tosses flower petals, some of which are more weeds than actual blossoms. But hey, it's the thought that counts. You wave, you smile. You try not to trip on the sacred goat walking in front of you like a VIP guest. You pass under a symbolic arch crafted from bundled reeds and sheer optimism and are guided to the fields, where the real work begins. In Mesopotamian culture, ceremonial plowing wasn't just for the soil. It was reenacted in ritual form by the community to awaken the fertility of the land. Some villages even reenacted the sexual union of gods through symbolic acts performed in public, which is exactly as uncomfortable as it sounds. Historians still argue whether these displays were performed earnestly or with a hefty dose of metaphor and interpretive dance. You're handed a plow, not one pulled by oxen. No, that would be too easy. This is the sacred hand plow, made of carved wood and festooned with ribbons. You dig it into the earth with a flourish you hope looks reverent, and not like your shoulders are about to fall off. The soil is dry, your back is screaming, and a small child in the crowd yells that your technique is embarrassing the barley. As you plod along the ceremonial furrow, a group of women chant praises to Inanna, their voices floating like silk across the breeze. It's poetic. It's beautiful. It's also 40 degrees Celsius, and there are flies circling your ears like tiny priests demanding sacrifice. Your reward: a handful of dates and a pat on the back from the village elder, whose palm smells suspiciously like fermented onions. Quirky tidbit in some Mesopotamian cities: statues of fertility goddesses were placed in fields overnight to literally watch over the soil. If that feels a little invasive, don't worry. You'll also sleep better, knowing a stone idol with 14 breasts is supervising your cucumbers. Back in the temple courtyard, another round of anointing begins. You're now considered a channel of divine favor, which mostly means more oil baths and the occasional symbolic head tapping with a branch dipped in river water. It's somewhere between a baptism and light forehead assault. You accept it with grace, mostly because protesting at this point risks angering both gods and aunties. This whole process isn't just religious, it's political. Who leads the rituals? Who touches the sacred seed? Who gets first pick of the blessed barley? These aren't trivial matters. Some scholars argue the fertility rites were an early form of state theater, legitimizing the power of kings through cosmic fan fiction. You try to maintain eye contact with the high priestess as she chants into the sky. You nod solemnly. You have no idea what she's saying. But you're at least 35% sure your nodding is keeping the universe in balance. By now, your sense of time has dissolved into a strange mix of sun angles and how sticky your ceremonial robe feels. You'd like to bathe, but bathing during a fertility festival? Not a chance. The body must retain the sacred oils. Translation: you're fermenting gently under the Mesopotamian sun, an offering to both the gods and future skin rashes. Today's agenda begins with chanting, drumming, and of course, more reenactments. But this time, it's less about soil and more about birth. You sit cross-legged with others in a temple chamber, surrounded by carved images of fertility deities with impossible proportions and unsettling smiles. A midwife stands in front holding a painted clay womb, from which she dramatically births a fig. Applause, symbolism, confusion. Welcome to ancient performance art. Next comes the blessing of livestock. You're assigned to the goats, possibly because of your aura, or possibly because you smelled vaguely like one by day 2. You gently pour barley mash into their troughs while reciting lines you don't understand. A nearby elder insists the goats will produce twins of great girth if you stroke their ears with proper rhythm. You comply. The goats look deeply unimpressed. As the sun climbs higher, you're led into a tent strung with date palms and painted textiles. This is the house of continuance, where women offer blessings for successful conception. They chant over bowls of seeds, spit into clay vessels for symbolic moisture, and smear your forehead with what is that, possibly fig syrup, possibly not. You're too afraid to ask. Quirky fact in certain Sumerian rites: participants believed they could transfer fertility by touching sacred river stones. These stones were warmed in the sun and then pressed to the stomach or lower back. If nothing else, it was nature's original hot water bottle. Suddenly, there's drumming, urgent, rhythmic. You're rushed outside for a ritual dance known as the turning of the seed. You join a circle of participants who spin slowly, then stomp the ground. It's choreographed chaos. The goal, to wake the earth from its slumber. The reality, you accidentally step on a ceremonial squash. No one says anything, but the look from the priestess suggests you may have doomed cucumber yields for the season. After the dance, you collapse under a fig tree with a few fellow initiates. Conversation is hushed, reverent, and slightly delirious. Someone shares a story of a woman who dreamed of twins during this rite and gave birth to triplets. Someone else warns you not to fall asleep in the shadow of the altar, or you'll dream of goats giving birth to you. A traveling bard begins to sing about Enki and Ninhursag, the Mesopotamian tale of a god birthing goddesses from his aching body parts. Historians still argue whether this story reflects divine fertility, medical metaphor, or just one very strange fever dream. Either way, it's told with enough flair to distract you from the beetle slowly crawling into your sandal. Night falls again. More incense, more symbolic grain tossing. You help carry baskets of sesame oil to the temple steps, then trace a spiral in the sand around each one. It's mesmerizing. It's also unclear what it does, but you're too tired to question anything anymore. You sleep curled on the temple mat, with one hand still smelling of goat and the other resting on a fertility idol's oddly shaped foot. You are, without doubt, very blessed and very itchy. You wake up with sesame seeds stuck to your face, the faint echo of flute music still clinging to the morning air. Your back aches not from spiritual rebirth, but from the ancient Mesopotamian mat that's about as soft as a pottery shard. But today is different. Today you are not merely witnessing fertility rituals. Today you become one. You are summoned at dawn by a priestess with a voice like gravel and incense smoke. She hands you a reed crown and an armful of wet clay. For the sacred figurines, she says, before walking off without further explanation. So you sit, shaping pudgy goddesses with swollen bellies, exaggerated hips, and unnerving eyes that seem to stare right back at you. They're supposed to represent abundance. Yours mostly look like stressed potatoes. But the real centerpiece of the day is the Great Union Rite. And here's where it gets spiritually intimate. No actual unions take place, at least. Not for most, but elaborate pantomimes do. Selected participants reenact the symbolic marriage between the fertility god and the high priestess. You're cast as witness number 4, a role that mostly involves holding a carved fan and not dropping it. You kneel as the priestess dressed in gold-threaded linen and wearing a crown of dates, yes. Actual fruit chants verses in an ancient tongue. The god is played by a man with a large beard, a painted stomach, and the tragic dignity of someone who lost a bet. Together, they mimic the union of earth and sky, seed and womb. You pretend not to notice when the date crown slips dramatically into the offering bowl. The gods will understand. In tribal Africa, similar rites played out with their own variations. In some communities, women of childbearing age would gather under a sacred tree and press clay symbols of fertility into the soil. Others would engage in dances that mimicked the swelling of pregnancy, accompanied by chants that, frankly, sound a lot like modern-day beatboxing. One obscure Bantu tribe even used carved phalluses as musical instruments. Yes, you heard that right. Instruments. You wonder, as you kneel in the dust and sweat through your wool tunic, how much of this is theater and how much is belief? Historians still argue whether these performances were literal invocations of divine power or symbolic acts meant to bond communities. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe you just stepped on another squash. The afternoon brings purification. That means smoke. Lots of it. Bundles of burning herbs are waved around your head, while someone chants what might be a blessing or possibly just a grocery list. You're rubbed with crushed date pits and anointed with palm oil that smells suspiciously like old stew. Now, you are clean, says the elder. You've never felt greasier. In a brief moment of peace, you're handed a small woven pouch filled with seeds, feathers, and a polished stone. A charm, apparently, to ensure your lineage continues. You nod solemnly, even though you suspect the stone is just a shiny piece of gravel from behind the temple. By sundown, another dance begins, this time less structured, more chaotic. You join in, your limbs moving somewhere between divine trance and mild dislocation. You laugh, despite yourself. You are tired, confused, possibly slightly delirious from the incense. But you are part of something ancient, weird, dusty, sticky, and beautiful in a way you can't quite explain. You sleep that night, with the pouch clutched in your hand, the faint taste of date syrup still on your lips, and the echo of sacred rhythms humming in your bones. You wake not to the sound of birds, but to the sharp bark of a priestess reminding you it's your turn to tend the fertility garden. Garden, of course, being a generous word. It's more of a dust patch with aspirations. Still, you grab the carved wooden hoe blunt, splintered, and possibly a punishment device, and drag your half-awake body toward the sacred planting field. Your task is to plant symbolic crops: barley in Mesopotamia, millet or sorghum if you're in certain parts of Africa. The idea is simple: sow the seeds, enact rebirth. The execution, much less divine. You dig into sun-baked clay with your blunt stick, trying not to impale your own foot. The ritual chants echo around you, promising life, growth, bounty. Your back screams something else entirely. You're joined by others, each performing the act with serious faces, as if this theater might indeed make the skies open and spill miracles. A young girl sings softly about wombs and rain. An elder spreads manure from a clay bowl. No one mentions the smell, because in this world, you don't get to complain. You just assume the gods have peculiar olfactory preferences. In Mesopotamia, these garden rites were deeply entwined with the myth of Tammuz, the shepherd god, whose death and resurrection represented the seasonal cycle. As you press seeds into dry dirt, you're reenacting his grief-stricken return from the underworld. You feel every bit of that grief, mostly in your thighs. Meanwhile, in tribal African settings, similar sowing rituals incorporated community-wide participation. Children painted with ash and ochre dashed between rows, blessing each seed with laughter, while women offered fermented milk to the earth. Yes, fermented. It's believed the sourness pleased ancestral spirits, although no one ever asked the milk's opinion on the matter. You're invited to pour a small bowl of sacred liquid over your seed row. It's warm, frothy, and smells like someone lost a yogurt bet. You try not to gag. It's life essence, says the elder beside you, patting your shoulder. And possibly goat urine. You mutter, too quietly for divine punishment. The rest of the day involves fertility exercises. That's right, ancient squats. You join a circle, copying movements meant to invite vitality into the hips. A phrase that sounds oddly like a medieval yoga pitch. You squat, you twist, you chant things like, "Let the seed find the soil," while trying not to pass out. You're sweating in places you didn't know existed. One quirky tradition: the ceremonial birthing stone. In some Mesopotamian temples, women would sit on a sacred carved rock, believed to transfer the goddess's power into their wombs. Today, it's your turn. You sit. It's cold. It's hard. It definitely has bird poop on it. But the priestess assures you, now your spirit is fertile. You just hope that's not a metaphor for an unexpected pregnancy. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuinely believed to impact reproduction or simply served as social cohesion tools. It's hard to say, but as you collapse near the planting rows, a goat chews your robe and the priestess claps approvingly. You do feel bonded to the earth, to the absurdity, and somehow to the past. By evening, you're led into the fertility hut for meditative humming. You hum in circles, swaying with others, lost in the rhythm of ancient expectation. You close your eyes. You dream of barley that waters itself, and a birthing stone with a cushion. Night doesn't fall in this world its size. A heavy, musky warmth settles in the ceremonial hut where the real mysteries begin. Tonight is the dream ritual. And no, it's not optional. You lie on a reed mat that feels suspiciously like a welcome mat for scorpions. Around you, women hum and sway, their bodies glinting with sacred oil that smells like a mix of olives, flowers, and unwashed feet. The priestess sprinkles something herbal into the fire. You cough. Someone calls it dream smoke. You call it choking on time. The idea is simple. Dreams reveal divine messages about fertility. Yours, your village's, the cow's next pregnancy. Everyone's fate is hanging on your REM cycle. So naturally, they've brewed you a nice, earthy tea to open the dream gate. It's thick. It's bitter. It might be 12% mud. You drink it anyway because saying no to a fertility priestess is not historically advisable. In Mesopotamia, these rituals could last all night. Priestesses recorded dream symbols and interpreted them with terrifying confidence. If you dreamed of a flooded field, it meant abundant harvest. If you dreamed of cracked clay, it meant a year of infertility. If you dreamed of being chased by a flaming goat, well, good luck with that one. Meanwhile, across the deserts and into sub-Saharan Africa, different tribes used similar nighttime journeys. In some, a woman would lie beside a fertility idol carved from ancient wood, believing dreams would merge her spirit with the ancestors. You don't get a carved idol tonight, just a goatskin pillow and a firm warning not to roll off your mat during trance. You're told to lie perfectly still. Let your soul rise. Someone whispers. Easier said than done. When your spine is being colonized by a bamboo splinter, but you obey. You close your eyes. You breathe the dream smoke. And soon, the hut fades. You're weightless, or nauseous, or both. Someone chants your name. At least, you think it's your name. Or maybe Yam Harvest. Either way, it's oddly comforting. The symbols start to arrive. A field of hands, a crow sitting on a lotus, a baby made of salt. When you mention this later, the priestess nods solemnly. The salt means cleansing. The baby means complication. No one explains the crow. Scholars still argue whether birds in these dreams meant messages from gods or warnings about poultry shortages. By dawn, you're woken with a splash of cool water blessed, obviously, and almost enough to rinse out the dream tea residue caked on your lips. You're expected to describe your visions in vivid detail, while the elders nod with terrifying intensity. One woman says she dreamed of a river of honey. Another dreamt her breasts turned into gourds. You dreamt of soup. Just soup. The priestess frowns. A watery omen. She mutters, "You are reassigned to watering duty." The rest of the day, interpretation time. You are surrounded by sticks, feathers, and what suspiciously resembles chicken bones. It's like a fertility-themed escape room run by a very dramatic oracle. Everything has meaning, especially when no one agrees what that meaning is. You are blessed again, oiled again, and told to remain chaste for 7 sunrises. As if that's a threat. After what you've endured, nothing could be more appealing than solitude and soap. You leave the hut exhausted, reeking, and somehow more confused than ever. But at least you are now one of the dreamers. one of the interpreters of goat-based destiny. And that has to count for something, maybe not in the afterlife, but definitely at local brunch circles. The sun's back. And surprise, so are the Beatles. They march like tiny soldiers across the ceremonial ground as you're dragged again to another sacred task. This time, you're participating in the Public Conception Festival. That's not its official name, of course, but the goal is clear: encourage fertility through collective chants, music, and if you're lucky, symbolic dancing. If you're not lucky, you become the symbolic dance. In Mesopotamia, this festival might coincide with the sacred marriage ritual, where the king symbolically marries the goddess Inanna through a high priestess. This whole act is celebrated with such elaborate performance and metaphor. You'd swear someone was writing romantic fan fiction for agriculture across the savannah. Tribal African cultures had similar seasonal ceremonies, only they involved fire, masks, and full-body paint. You are given a gourd rattle and a suspiciously itchy headdress. Tradition, you're told, the music begins. Drums that feel like they're pounding your ribcage from the outside. Flutes that mimic birds having emotional breakdowns. You shuffle forward, trying to keep pace. Everyone's feet are bare, including yours. And the dirt is both warm and sharp a texture you now describe as stinging oatmeal. You shake your gourd rattle. Because what else can you do? Then, the procession of wombs begins. No, seriously. Women of childbearing age carry clay urns symbolizing the uterus. And older women bless each urn with powdered herbs, ash, or, in one peculiar variation, crushed beetle shells. Historians still argue whether this beetle dust was symbolic of regeneration or just a particularly aggressive form of glitter. You get paired with an elder whose primary role is to yell rhythmic encouragements directly into your ear. Dance for the ancestors, she shouts. Smile at the spirits. Unclench your shoulders. It's like spiritual aerobics meets a shouting competition. You're sweating, you're dusty, and someone just stepped on your foot. It's considered a good omen. Of course it is. The child approaches with what looks like a very old egg. Eat, she says, as if it's a challenge. You nibble. It's rubbery, slightly warm, and gives off a flavor profile best described as ancient sock. You're told it's preserved ostrich yolk, a delicacy, possibly a prank. Later, you're invited to lie in a ceremonial garden, surrounded by sprouting crops and fertility idols. In Mesopotamia, women would bury symbolic fertility tokens here, small clay figures, beads, sometimes hair. You have nothing except a leftover beetle shell, which you solemnly place beneath a squash vine. Let this bring many cucumbers, you whisper, and someone nearby applauds. You are oiled again. Always the oil. It's sandalwood this time. And someone mentions it's meant to stimulate the third womb chakra. You ask how many womb chakras there are. No one answers. Everyone is too busy singing to a carved wooden hippo that represents the fertility goddess Taweret. It's cute. It's terrifying. It's somehow both. As night approaches, the festival slows. You're told to meditate while sitting on an anthill to ground your spirit. Within seconds, your spirit has officially left the building. But you sit, because everyone else is doing it. That's the thing about ancient fertility rituals. They rely heavily on peer pressure and biting insects. Someone offers you fermented millet. You pretend to sip. It tastes like moldy bread mixed with hope. Everyone's grinning. Someone plays a one-string fiddle. The stars come out. The moon rises. And in a weird, itchy, slightly bruised way, you feel part of something bigger. Or maybe that's just the beetle venom kicking in. Either way, you've survived the festival. Your womb has been symbolically painted, your chakras metaphorically untied, and your soul possibly misplaced in the gourd rattle. You're not sure what's next, but it probably involves more ash, another egg, and very little sitting. You wake up curled beneath a goatskin blanket that smells like wisdom and mildew. Your mouth tastes like ceremonial dust and regret. Someone's humming nearby a low, nasal tune that sounds both ancient and suspiciously like yesterday's beetle chant. Your body is sore in ways you didn't think were possible. Your ankle has been painted blue. You don't ask why. This morning, you are introduced to the symbols of fecundity. A cheerful elder woman drapes a necklace over your neck. It's made entirely of dried fruit seeds and one mystery tooth. It brings twins, she says proudly. You nod, like that's good news. Around you, others wear belts of woven reeds, bracelets of snail shells, and hats made of, yes, animal fur shaped to resemble pregnant wombs. It's avant-garde. It's itchy. In both Mesopotamian and tribal African fertility cultures. Objects were more than decorations. They were active participants in ritual. Each item was believed to hold some power gourd charms to enhance water fertility, feathers to attract male spirits, even small figurines meant to ward off rival wombs. And yes, rival wombs was absolutely a concept. Historians still argue whether these symbolic battles were spiritual metaphors or just passive-aggressive prehistory. Today's activity, Earth alignment, it's exactly as dramatic as it sounds. You're instructed to lie face down in a sacred dirt patch and channel the pulse of the fertile Earth Mother. The dirt is not warm. It is not soft. It gets into your ear immediately because dirt has no boundaries. Around you, others are already murmuring. You whisper too, unsure what to say. Dear Mother Earth, thank you for turnips. A priestess sprinkles ash on your back and traces shapes with a stick. You're told this will open your grounding portal. You are not sure which body part that is. When you lift your head, someone gently shoves it back down. The beetles listen through the soil. A voice murmurs beside you. That's oddly poetic. And also concerning. After the alignment, it's time to craft your own seed baby. This is a small doll, usually made of clay, sticks, or cloth, and filled with seeds to represent fertility. Yours ends up looking like a very lopsided potato with toothpick limbs. You name it Greg. Greg, the fertility totem. Others have carved intricate dolls with facial tattoos and tiny genitalia. Greg has one googly eye made of shell and a lot of spirit. You carry Greg through the next part of the ritual, a communal sowing circle. Each participant buries their seed baby under a mound of enriched earth, sometimes with an offering dried fruit, feathers, spit, or for the brave, a piece of your own hair. You accidentally sneeze during your offering, and no one corrects you. A strong wind is good luck. Someone whispers, later, you're blessed again. This time with river mud. It's smeared on your hands, your forehead, and unfortunately, your upper lip. You are now anointed with life clay, which is said to bind your spirit to the fertile cycle. It mostly binds your eyebrows together. You feel like a root vegetable with legs. Evening falls, and the women gather to chant around a large fire. The flames crackle. Someone's making rhythmic noises with what looks like a catfish skeleton. They hand you one. You join in. The chant builds, rising and falling like wind over dry grass. In this moment, tired, muddy, and full of millet-based confusion, you get it, sort of, fertility, for these ancient communities, wasn't just biological, it was social, emotional, spiritual. To be fertile was to belong, to offer life back to the land and your people. And even if you're a confused time tourist clutching a doll named Greg, you're somehow part of that rhythm, that dusty, dancing, ever so slightly insect-infested rhythm. Morning arrives, not with a rooster's call, but with the clack of gourds and the unmistakable scent of something fermented. Again, your hair has hardened into what could be considered a fertility helmet. Greg, your slightly cursed seed baby from last night, is now missing, replaced by a small stone with a smiley face drawn on it. No one explains. The ritual cycle has entered its final phase. Today is all about public celebration and sacred performance, which, as it turns out, includes interpretive dance, horn blowing, and the kind of mask wearing that makes modern Halloween costumes feel underdressed. You are given a costume made from leaves, bark, and something that may or may not be a snake molt. It crunches when you walk. Your headdress includes 2 antlers and a suspicious feathered tail. You decide not to ask questions. In both ancient Mesopotamian cities and across many tribal African villages, public ceremony was the emotional crescendo of fertility rites. These weren't just rituals, they were performances. Entire communities came to witness, cheer, and sometimes judge. You join a long procession through the village, following a high priestess who is both majestic and terrifying, with silver lines painted across her face like lightning bolts. Your role in the parade. You are officially the fertile breeze. This means you dance erratically, spin occasionally, and throw handfuls of dried herbs into the air like a confused wedding planner. The crowd loves it. Children run alongside you. An old man throws a root vegetable at your feet as tribute. You do not trip. A miracle. The dancing ends at a wide circle near the fields. This is where the fertility drum begins. It's carved from a hollowed tree trunk, covered in cowhide, and hits with a deep boom that reverberates inside your ribcage. Women take turns stepping into the center, mimicking planting, harvest, birth, and renewal through movement. You're ushered in. Your performance includes a strange squat, 2 wide arm waves, and something that suspiciously resembles YMCA. Everyone applauds. You've contributed to the cosmic cycle. Then comes the blessing from the mud oracle. A woman in a long red robe dips her fingers into a sacred mud pool and touches each person's forehead. She whispers predictions. To your left, someone is told they'll have 7 strong sons. To your right, someone will apparently birth goats. You get the spirits see you as a helpful uncle. Fair enough. As the fire is lit for the closing ceremony, offerings are thrown in herbs, dried fish, doll parts, Greg, and ash from the life clay. Sparks rise around you. Laughter and song bubble up like spring water. No one is tired, despite the fact that it's been 3 straight days of dirt. chanting, and seed symbolism. You, on the other hand, are spiritually fulfilled and physically destroyed. You can't feel your ankles. You might be part tree now. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were religious obligations, community bonding tools, or good old-fashioned theater. Whatever their original purpose, they undeniably held power binding people together, shaping cultural identity. And yes, making you wear bark underwear in front of strangers. As the crowd disperses, someone offers you a drink of something bitter and frothy. You accept. It tastes like compost and moonlight. Somehow, you're grateful. The sky fades from deep indigo to dawn, and you realize you've made it through earth alignments and antler hats, through mud oracles and symbolic sneezing. You've survived the full cycle, emotionally confused, spiritually questioned, but undeniably present. And that, in ancient times, was enough. Now, it's time to rest. You lie back in the soft night, letting the earth cradle you with its quiet hum. The stars above look the same as they did 1,000 years ago, watching generations whisper to the soil and sway to the drums. Your breath slows. The chanting fades. Even Greg, wherever he may be now, probably found peace in the ceremonial compost. You've seen what it means to belong not through wealth or words, but through rituals painted in dust, mud, and rhythm. The fire crackles one last time. Someone hums nearby. Maybe it's the wind, or maybe it's just history exhaling. Let your eyelids fall, heavy as harvest baskets. The earth has received your offering, and now it returns silence in kind. Sweet dreams. Now, we begin in a dust-caked courtyard somewhere between myth and Mesopotamia. The air is thick with the scent of crushed herbs and heat-baked stone. And you lucky, you are about to become part of something far bigger than yourself. You kneel awkwardly beside a smoking brazier, while a high priestess chants in a language older than logic. You'd assume rituals involving divine fertility would be gentle and poetic. You would be wrong. The good news, you're alive. The bad, your role in tonight's spiritual ceremony includes acting as a stand-in for the god Dumuzi, and that definitely wasn't on your resume. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, where are you listening from tonight? Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're surrounded by symbols of fertility figures carved from stone with alarmingly wide hips, bowls of barley, and a ceremonial bed that looks like it hasn't been washed since the Euphrates last flooded. Everything about this ritual screams importance, and yet also confusion. The priestess smears oil on your forehead and murmurs about blessings. You nod solemnly, trying to ignore the fact that you're wearing a robe 3 sizes too small and a garland of what might be garlic. This isn't about you. It's about the land, the people, the gods. But you're definitely in the middle of it. Ancient Mesopotamian civilizations, like the Sumerians and Akkadians, believed that human actions could literally inspire divine responses. In other words, make the right offering, do the right dance, perform the right, ritual act, and boom, crops grow, babies cry, and rivers don't drown your goats. A mainstream historical fact. Temples of Inanna, the goddess of fertility and war. Yes, both were political and spiritual centers where sacred rites were carried out to ensure agricultural success. These rites often involved sacred marriage ceremonies, hierosgamos, between a priestess representing Inanna and a male figure representing the king or Dumuzi. Were these literal unions? Symbolic theater historians still argue whether the ceremony was a performance, a metaphor, or an awkward team-building exercise with spiritual overtones. You're standing in a Roman forum with a crowd that's far too excited for a legal proceeding. Breadcrumbs scatter on the stone floor, pigeons strut like they own the place, and someone's brought figs like it's a picnic. Because today isn't just another trial, it's a public shaming. And whether in Rome or feudal Japan, when someone breaks the unspoken contract of fidelity, the punishment isn't complete until it's seen. Adultery, it turns out, was never a private matter. It was performance art with real consequences. In Rome, a woman caught cheating might be paraded through the streets wearing a veil that said, "I made bad choices, and now I walk on cobblestones while strangers hiss at me." It wasn't enough to exile her, she had to be unmade. One judgmental stare at a time. One mainstream fact: Roman punishments for women found guilty of adultery could include public humiliation rituals. These sometimes involved barefoot walks through public squares, public declarations of disgrace, and a formal stripping of citizen status, essentially being unfriended by an entire empire. And that wasn't even the weirdest part. There's a fringe tale about a senator's wife forced to wear a donkey mask in public for a year, supposedly because her lover was a lowly stable boy, a symbol of bestial association. Yes, but also a chance for every shopkeeper in town to get in a daily laugh. Whether or not it happened, the rumor alone did the job. Meanwhile, in feudal Japan, shaming worked differently. It wasn't loud, it was silent and excruciating. A dishonored woman might be expelled from her home, her head shaved, her family crest revoked. She might be made to wear unpatterned robes, the textile equivalent of a scarlet letter. If she was lucky, she was sent to a distant province. If she was unlucky, she stayed surrounded by neighbors who no longer saw her face, only her failure. Historians still argue whether these symbolic punishments were more effective than physical ones. After all, a beating heals, but a public shame ritual that echoes for generations. Entire family lines could be tainted. A younger sister's marriage prospects might vanish. A son's rank in court might drop 3 notches all because mom made the mistake of glancing too long at someone else's bento box. In both cultures, the humiliation wasn't just for the woman. Sometimes the lover got his share, especially if he was lower status. One Roman man was reportedly tattooed with the word adulterer on his forehead. Another was forced to wear women's clothing for a week in the market. Again, scholars debate if these were laws or very enthusiastic urban legends, but either way, the public had front row seats, and so now. As you lie back imagining veiled figures and shaved heads disappearing down narrow streets, remember the worst punishment wasn't exile. It was memory. You wander now into the hush that follows scandal. The crowds have gone home. The scrolls have been rolled away, and the punishment robes hang limp on pegs in the corner. What's left is the long quiet, the part no law touches, because after the stonings, the exiles, the shaved heads, and the theatrical courtroom gasps, the aftermath lives in families, in silences, in whispered questions no one really wants answered. Adultery wasn't just a crime. It was a story that people kept retelling long after the rice was harvested or the toga was folded away. A stain on a family name. A reason someone's daughter didn't get a good marriage. An explanation for why a household's laughter never came back. And yet, people still risked it. For desire, for revenge, for freedom, or just, sometimes, for the sheer thrill of saying, I'm more than a role someone handed me. One mainstream fact in both ancient Rome and feudal Japan. Family was the center of legal, social, and moral order. When adultery occurred, the punishment rippled outward, damaging networks, dowries, lineages, and honor debts. It was less about the couple and more about everyone else who now had to pretend they weren't looking. And in that delicate, post-scandal space, something strange could happen. Forgiveness, quiet arrangements, silent partnerships that moved forward as though nothing happened. Historians still argue whether these resolutions were rare or just undocumented. After all, the most successful reconciliations don't make it into law books. They make it into the rhythm of daily life shared meals, rearranged rooms, a new emphasis on caution. There's a fringe story, possibly apocryphal, about a Roman woman caught in adultery who was divorced, shamed, and sent away, only to be quietly brought back a year later, her ex-husband claiming she was a different woman. She probably was. Different, older, less romantic, and maybe just better at keeping secrets. They lived together for another decade. Nobody asked questions. And in a small Japanese village, an old gravestone tells of a woman who returned to the house and served tea until her death. No name, no date, just that. A quiet footnote to a life that once burned too brightly in the wrong direction. So now, your eyes close, and the world of sharp swords and crumbling marble fades. No more trials. No more gossip. No more whispered accusations floating through rice paper walls. Just the slow breath of history settling down, tucking you in with the realization that human desire, clumsy, hungry, reckless, is the same in every era. But the consequences, oh, those are always dressed for drama. Let your thoughts drift now. Not through scandal, but through stillness. Let the fires die out. The crowds dissolve. The old rules fold neatly into dust. The stories have been told. The robes laid flat. The shame, the justice, the mercy, whatever was dealt has passed. Sleep now, and dream only of quiet now. We walk into a house where the atrium smells like wine, sweat, and the kind of secrets only marble walls can keep. You glide across mosaic floors, Careful not to trip on the hem of a stola. Everything's pristine except the people. Roman nobles stroll around pretending they're gods, but behind those gold-trimmed tunics are jealous husbands, manipulative wives, and lovers who should have run faster. You would never think that having an affair could lead to being exiled to a rock in the middle of the sea, but welcome to ancient Rome, where adultery isn't just scandalous, it's a civic offense. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love knowing who else can't sleep. Now, back to the whispers behind the columns. You trudge past statues of Venus and Mars, the deities of love and war, conveniently parked next to each other, and realize that Romans took both topics a little too seriously. Adultery, in particular, was a weird blend of divine offense and political inconvenience. Because in Rome, cheating wasn't just a private mess, it was public business. The Lex Julia, a set of moral laws passed by Augustus in 18 BCE, made adultery a criminal act. That's right, the emperor, who famously couldn't keep his own house in order, decided to legislate romance. Under this law, a husband who caught his wife in the act could within reason kill the lover on the spot. He had to do it quickly. Though, no post-bath reflection, and only if the guy was of low social rank. Nobles got more paperwork. The wife, meanwhile, could be divorced, humiliated, and exiled. Augustus even punished his own daughter Julia under this law, shipping her off to a tiny island with zero nightlife and plenty of shame. You'd think being the emperor's daughter might help, but nope, apparently. Nothing ruins a family faster than sleeping with too many poets. Historians still argue whether Augustus truly believed in moral reform, or if this was just a sneaky way to control the aristocracy through their bedsheets. It's hard to say, but what's clear is that Roman society treated adultery like a mix between a legal proceeding and a reality show. People loved a scandal, especially one involving someone else's toga. And of course, double standards were part of the architecture. A man caught cheating might face a raised eyebrow or a sarcastic toast at dinner. A woman, she might lose her home, her money, her children, and any last shred of social protection. Some wives tried to defend themselves by blaming their lovers for seduction, manipulation, or dark omens from Jupiter. It rarely worked. One fringe detail, some Roman households allegedly kept secret rooms or hidden staircases, escape routes for lovers when footsteps echoed down the hall. Adultery wasn't just a risk, it was practically a sport. So now, as you settle into your pillow, remember marble columns may look sturdy, but they were built around fragile egos. And in Rome, love was never just about feelings. It was about status, spectacle, and surviving the morning gossip. You slip down a candlelit corridor where senators whisper more about silk sheets than statecraft. Welcome to the fine print of the Lex Julia, Rome's official no funny business policy, which, ironically, led to a lot of very funny business. On paper, it's clear adultery is a crime. In practice, well, you need a map, a bribe, and possibly a cousin in the judiciary to figure it all out. The Lex Julia de Adulterius Coercendus tries saying that 3 times while holding your dignity was Augustus's attempt to make Rome morally great again. It criminalized adultery for the first time, forcing husbands to report unfaithful wives or risk being seen as complicit. But here's the fun part. The law was full of conditions, exceptions, and more loopholes than a gladiator's net. To start, if a man caught his wife in the act, he had to act fast, like still adjusting his tunic fast. He had the right to kill her lover, but only if the lover was of lower status, like an actor, slave, or someone with suspiciously unpolished sandals. If the lover was a fellow noble that called for a lawsuit, not a sword. One mainstream fact: women caught in adultery could lose their dowries, be barred from remarrying, and be exiled to remote islands. A popular destination for disgraced aristocratic women was Pandateria, basically the Roman version of your sleeping on the couch, except the couch is a volcanic rock surrounded by sharks. Meanwhile, the lover could be punished too, but many found clever ways to vanish, plead innocence, or point fingers back at the husband for neglecting his sacred marital duties. In other words, she cheated, but also, you're kind of boring. Some men, eager to upgrade wives or settle political scores, staged elaborate traps. One senator allegedly arranged for his wife's lover to sneak in through a fake servant entrance, then caught them accidentally and brought the whole neighborhood as witnesses. Fringe detail. The lover escaped through the same door he entered, but the wife wasn't so lucky. Historians still argue whether these laws ever applied equally. In theory, Rome was full of moral reform. In reality, the rich had lawyers, networks, and plausible deniability. A senator could discover an affair right after his wife inherited land. A general might accuse his rival's sister to discredit a family. It was less about virtue, more about power, with adultery as a very dramatic excuse. And the public, they ate it up. Trials for adultery often turned into courtroom theater, complete with character witnesses, tearful servants, and occasionally stylized reenactments involving mannequins. Because if Rome loved anything more than conquest, it was spectacle. So here you are, balancing on a law built like a colander, designed to look solid but leak when needed. You dodge accusations, collect hush money, and pray to Venus that nobody finds the love letters you hid behind the Lair statue. And as you drift off, remember, the Lex Julia didn't stop cheating. It just made it official. You wake up mid-trial, somewhere nearby. A crowd is gasping politely, while a Roman man adjusts his toga like its body armor. Welcome to the Roman court system, where vengeance is stylish, legal, and occasionally catered. You're not just watching a legal proceeding. You're watching one man's relationship meltdown become public entertainment, with extra olives on the side. Because in Rome, if your wife cheats, you don't cry about it. You litigate. Loudly. Preferably in front of everyone who matters. Let's be clear. A Roman husband couldn't just quietly stew in betrayal and move on with his life. That would be suspicious. The Lex Julia required him to report his wife's adultery. If he didn't, and someone else did, he could be prosecuted for pimping. Yes, that was the term. A man who knew about his wife's affair and allowed it to continue was essentially accused of profiting from her behavior, legally and morally. One mainstream fact: the moment a wife was convicted, her husband could reclaim her dowry, a tidy sum that might include land, slaves, or very lucrative vineyards. The motivation for pressing charges wasn't always heartbreak. Sometimes it was real estate. Of course, the trial itself was half courtroom, half soap opera. Witnesses testified in poetic monologues. Love letters were read aloud like bad slam poetry. One fringe account tells of the husband who hired actors to reenact the affair in court, complete with props, background music, and a dramatically opened curtain. Apparently, the judge applauded. And this wasn't just petty nobles. Senators, generals, even relatives of the emperor used adultery accusations as strategic tools. Got a political enemy with a beautiful wife. Accuse him of tolerating her behavior. Bonus points if you can produce a scandalous dinner guest list. Historians still argue whether most of these cases were genuine betrayals or just well-timed performances. Meanwhile, the wife, she didn't get much say. She might protest, produce counter-witnesses, or insist on divine dreams sent by Juno. But most of the time, her fate was sealed before her sandals hit the courtroom steps. Public opinion favored the husband as long as he seemed properly outraged and his tunic was clean. Occasionally, husbands went too far. One man, so eager to prosecute, accused not just his wife, but 4 of her alleged lovers, one of whom was his own cousin. The case collapsed, the family imploded, and the only winner was the bakery that sold cakes shaped like broken hearts. Still, the pattern-held adultery wasn't just punished, it was paraded. Romans didn't separate law from theater. Why whisper betrayal when you could scream it in front of a marble audience? And so, you lie back now, heavy with secondhand drama, wondering how many husbands walked home from court, dowry in hand, pretending their bruised pride had nothing to do with dinner parties gone wrong. Justice in Rome was many things. Private was not one of them. You slide a paper door shut behind you, careful not to disturb the tatami mats or the silence because here in feudal Japan, silence isn't awkward, it's judgment. You'd never think a glance could carry the weight of a guillotine. But one misstep in a samurai household, and even your shadow gets suspicious looks. Welcome to the land of blades and blushes, where adultery doesn't come with legal papers. It comes with a final bow. You tiptoe through a home ruled not just by husbands, but by the idea of honor, that ever-hungry ghost haunting every sword, scroll, and shared glance. The consequences of adultery weren't merely personal. They were structural. To betray your marriage was to betray your bloodline, your clan, your ancestors, your sword, and possibly your furniture arrangement. In other words, don't do it. One mainstream truth for members of the samurai class: marital infidelity, especially by a wife, could be punished by death, not after a long trial, but by the swift justice of a husband or his lord. No judge, no jury, just a quiet tisk, and then a very loud thud. For men, cheating wasn't great, but it was tolerated, as long as you didn't embarrass anyone or write poems about it. And that's the key embarrassment. If no one knew about the affair, it could be buried like an off-season kimono. But if gossip reached the neighbors, or worse, your daimyo, the situation escalated fast. Feudal justice had a sort of tiered elegance. A samurai husband might dispatch his wife and her lover in a single evening, wipe his blade, and return to finish his dinner. There are records of some men offering lovers the honorable option of suicide. Others were less polite and more stabby. There's a fringe tale of a jealous samurai who, upon suspecting his wife of an affair, calmly served tea to his guests while sending a servant to retrieve a bamboo mat soaked in river water. He later wrapped both lovers in it and left the bundle at the temple gates with a note that read, "Returned unclean." Historians still argue whether the story is literal or a moral parable, with surprisingly effective branding. And what of the women? Some were trained in onnana bugeisha arts, meaning they could fight. But few had real power in these matters. A wife suspected of infidelity might be shaved bald, a visible mark of disgrace. Others were cast out with no family name, no income, and no way to remarry. Even the lucky ones lived under layers of suspicion, watched not just by their husbands, but by mother-in-laws, retainers, and neighbors with very keen ears. Historians debate whether these punishments were truly about adultery or about preserving clan reputation. In a world where appearance trumped intimacy, maybe betrayal wasn't what you did, but what people found out. Honor, after all, had little patience for nuance, so as you slide your feet into warm socks. Imagine the quiet tension of a house where every rustle of silk could be a threat. Adultery here wasn't scandalous. It was fatal. You're standing in a courtyard that smells like plum blossoms and regret. The sun is setting over tiled rooftops, and someone is sharpening a tanto not for show, but for ceremony, because when an affair is discovered in feudal Japan, you don't get a scolding, You get options, grim, poetic options, and none of them involve talking it out over herbal tea. Here, punishment is wrapped in etiquette. Death isn't chaotic, it's choreographed. The preferred method for a dishonored samurai male, seppuku ritual suicide by disembowelment, followed by a cleanup crew with better calligraphy than compassion. It's considered an honorable exit, though you'd be forgiven for having a slightly different opinion while holding the knife. Mainstream historical fact: male samurai caught in adultery, especially with a woman of equal or higher status, were sometimes granted the right to commit seppuku instead of facing execution. This wasn't kindness. It was image control, because nothing ruins a clan's weekend like public scandal involving someone's concubine and a poorly timed haiku. Women, though very different deal. A wife caught in adultery might be executed on the spot by her husband or handed over to her in-laws for something euphemistically called family discipline. Spoiler, it didn't involve stern lectures. Often, it meant suffocation, strangulation, or drowning methods considered more dignified for women. Yes, drowning was dignified. That's how low the bar was. And then there's the fringe case, a regional lord in the 17th century who reportedly invited guests to a lavish dinner, only to reveal mid-meal that two attendees were engaged in an affair. He forced the lovers to duel each other while the other guests watched and commented politely. Like it was a chess match, the loser died. The winner was exiled. The chicken was reportedly excellent. Historians still argue whether the story is literal, exaggerated, or just proof that rich people have always been terrible at dinner parties. Of course, discretion played a major role. If a samurai could keep the scandal quiet, he might opt for more subtle revenge, shaving his wife's head and sending her to a convent, where she'd spend the rest of her life praying and rearranging rocks in the garden. One temple even had a special wing for fallen wives, a sort of spiritual purgatory with extra incense and very little small talk. And the lover, if they escape death, they might become a monk voluntarily or otherwise. There's an account of one man who found enlightenment shortly after being caught. Enlightenment, in this case, included no hair, no shoes, and a vow of silence longer than most marriages. Historians debate whether these punishments were actually common or simply exaggerated by later chroniclers trying to romanticize the brutality. But one thing's clear: feudal Japan wasn't interested in reconciliation. You didn't fix betrayal. You erased it so as you lie back now and let your thoughts drift past cherry trees and sliding doors. Remember, in this world, love was a weapon, and honor was a countdown. If you got caught, you didn't just pay a price. You became a cautionary tale. You shuffle quietly into the lacquered shadows of a samurai household, where even the koi seems suspicious. There's a scroll on the wall with delicate calligraphy, something about serenity and truth, but everyone in the room is trying not to blink too loudly. Because if there's one thing worse than committing adultery In feudal Japan, it's being suspected of it. And suspicion, that was a sport all its own. Samurai wives walked a line thinner than a katana edge, expected to be loyal, graceful, fertile, obedient, and ideally invisible unless pouring tea. They were also constantly monitored, and not just by men. Enter the Onazukuo, women appointed to spy on other women. Their job: read letters, note suspicious perfumes, and casually suggest that someone's sleeve was scented a little too sweetly. Think gossip with a government seal. Mainstream fact in high-ranking samurai households. Female attendants often served as informal surveillance, tasked with reporting on the lady of the house's behavior. These weren't jealous rivals. They were part of the home's internal security system, like human CCTV and silk robes. One particularly paranoid warlord had his wife's messages inspected daily and banned her from owning mirrors, claiming vanity was the first step toward disloyalty. Fringe detail. There's a tale about a noblewoman who used her pet crane to deliver secret notes to her lover in the next compound. It worked beautifully until the bird accidentally dropped one into the garden pond, where a servant fished it out and handed it straight to the lady's mother-in-law. The crane vanished. The lady disappeared from the records. Historians still argue whether these surveillance systems were effective at preventing actual adultery or just made everyone miserable and creatively anxious. After all, when a glance could mean execution, people got inventive, whispered poetry in fan folds, coded embroidery patterns, even rearranging calligraphy brushes as messages. It was espionage by flower arrangement, and suspicion was contagious. A woman's perceived flirtation could stain her entire family. A too long gaze at a visiting courtier might delay her brother's marriage proposal or cost her father a promotion. Because in this society, honor wasn't just personal, it was transferable, like a cursed heirloom you never asked for. Of course, not every accusation was genuine. Sometimes a jealous servant, a political rival, or even a bored relative could ruin a life with a well-placed rumor. One widow allegedly spent 20 years in a convent for an affair she never had, all because she laughed too loudly at a soldier's joke during dinner. Yet even in this suffocating web of suspicion, women found ways to resist. Some built reputations for spiritual purity so untouchable, no one dared question them. Others leaned into cunning faking illnesses, manipulating their own reputations, or redirecting blame so subtly it became a form of martial art. But in most cases, suspicion alone was enough. You didn't need proof, just timing, whispering bamboo, and a household that valued silence more than truth. So as you lie back under imaginary silk sheets and listen to the wind through sliding doors, remember, in feudal Japan, adultery didn't have to happen. Only suspicion did. You duck into a crowded Roman alley that smells like olives, sweat, and disappointment. A fishmonger argues with a baker. Laundry flaps above your head like surrender flags. This isn't the world of senators and samurai lords. This is the realm of commoners. And here, adultery is just as risky, just less poetic. There are no exile islands or formal duels, just fines, floggings, and the occasional public humiliation. Still charming, though, in a please don't look too closely kind of way. In both ancient Rome and feudal Japan, class shaped how adultery was punished if you were poor. The law wasn't symbolic. It was sweaty and immediate. And if you were a woman, well, let's just say your options included be quiet, move away, or pray someone's too busy to notice. Mainstream fact: Roman lower-class men could take unfaithful wives to court. But most didn't bother. Trials were expensive, and so were bribes. Instead, informal punishments took place at the community level. Think neighbors scolding, employers docking wages, or mothers-in-law staging emotionally devastating interventions with bread and shame. One fringe anecdote tells of a Roman tanner who, upon catching his wife sneaking off with a butcher, paraded her through the market square wearing nothing but fish guts and irony. Not technically legal, but effective. She reportedly left town. So did the butcher in Japan. Commoners face their own blend of legal and social repercussions. Adultery laws did exist, but enforcement varied wildly by region, magistrate mood, and the size of your rice harvest. A husband might drag his wife before a local official and demand she be branded, tattooed, or fined, sometimes. The punishment was exile to another village, sometimes just a forced divorce and a lifetime of gossip. Men often faced no punishment at all unless they slept with someone's wife and forgot to be discreet. Then things got unpredictable. There's one rural record of a farmer being forced to dig a new irrigation trench as penance for stealing another man's honor. It worked. Apparently the crops were great that year. Historians still argue whether these double standards were formal law or just cultural practice passed down with the pickled radish recipes. But the result was the same women paid a heavier price. One misstep could lead to being disowned, unemployed, or worse, reclassified as available, which in both cultures meant unwanted attention and a harder life. And yet, the lower classes were often less judgmental than the elite. Why? Maybe because survival mattered more than scandal. If your neighbor had an affair but still helped with the harvest, did it really matter? That said, don't underestimate the power of gossip in both societies. Rumors moved faster than oxen and stuck longer than ink. So you sit now on the cracked Roman stoop or a weathered Japanese porch, watching the world judge and forgive in uneven doses. No trials, no scrolls, just weary people trying to make love work in systems that rarely gave them space to breathe. Adultery didn't only break hearts,